Welcome to Miss Scarlett. Subscribe and don't miss out on Patreon. Have fun! The city streets came alive with the chatter of people heading out for a night of fun and adventure. Among them was Ethan, a young man in his mid-20s, who found himself swept up in an unexpected turn of events. Earlier that day, Ethan had been going through his mail when he stumbled upon an envelope addressed to Ethel Johnson. The similarity in names piqued his curiosity, and he couldn't resist opening it. Inside, he discovered an invitation to a ladies' night out, complete with details about the venue and dress code. For a moment, Ethan considered tossing the invitation aside and forgetting about it. But something stirred within him, a sense of excitement, a craving for adventure. He'd been stuck in a rut lately, his social life as stagnant as week-old coffee. This could be just the thing to shake things up.
"Why not?"
he muttered to himself, running a hand through his disheveled hair.
"It's probably just a general invite. What's the worst that could happen?"
With that thought, Ethan made up his mind. He'd go to this ladies' night out and see what all the fuss was about. It couldn't hurt to expand his social circle, right? As the appointed hour drew near, Ethan found himself standing outside a trendy bar called the Velvet Lounge. His palms were sweaty, and his heart raced with a mixture of excitement and nervousness. He'd put on his nicest shirt and even dabbed on a bit of cologne for good measure. Taking a deep breath, he pushed open the door and stepped inside. The interior was dimly lit, with plush velvet booths lining the walls and a sleek bar dominating the center of the room. The air was thick with the scent of perfume and the sound of laughter. A group of women near the entrance turned to look at him, their eyes widening in surprise. For a moment, Ethan's heart sank. He'd made a terrible mistake. He was about to turn tail and run when one of the women, a tall blonde with a dazzling smile, approached him. "Oh my gosh, you must be Ethel's cousin! She told us you might be joining us tonight. I'm Amanda!" Ethan blinked, momentarily stunned. His mind raced, trying to process this unexpected turn of events. Should he correct her? Tell her it was all a misunderstanding? But before he could form a coherent thought, Amanda had linked her arm through his and was leading him towards the group. "Ladies, look who's here! Ethel's cousin finally made it!" A chorus of excited greetings washed over him as he found himself surrounded by a sea of smiling faces. Ethan's mouth went dry, and he struggled to find his voice.
Hi everyone. I'm Ethan.
He managed to croak out, his voice an octave higher than usual. One of the women, a petite brunette with sparkling green eyes, cocked her head to the side. "Ethan? I thought Ethel said her cousin's name was Eden." Panic flared in Ethan's chest. He was about to be found out, but then, almost miraculously, Amanda jumped in to save him. "Oh, you know how Ethel is with names. She probably got it mixed up. Besides, Ethan, Eden, they're pretty similar, right?" The group nodded in agreement, and Ethan felt a wave of relief wash over him. He was in the clear, at least for now. "So, Ethan," Amanda continued, guiding him towards an empty booth, "tell us all about yourself. What brings you to our little corner of the world?" Ethan's mind raced as he tried to come up with a plausible story. "Oh, just visiting. Thought I'd check out the local scene, meet new people." The women nodded appreciatively, seemingly satisfied with his vague explanation. As they settled into the booth, a waiter appeared with a tray of colorful cocktails. "Ladies' night special," he announced, distributing the drinks. "Cosmopolitans for everyone!" Ethan stared at the pink concoction in front of him, adorned with a delicate lemon twist. He'd never had a cosmopolitan before, but he figured now was as good a time as any to try. Raising the glass to his lips, he took a tentative sip. The sweet, tangy flavor exploded on his tongue, and he couldn't help but let out a small of appreciation. The women around him giggled, clearly amused by his reaction. "First Cosmo?" The brunette, whose name he learned was Sophie, asked with a grin. Ethan nodded, feeling a blush creep up his neck.
"Is it that obvious?"
"Don't worry, honey," Amanda chimed in, patting his arm. "We'll make sure you have the full ladies' night experience." As the night progressed, Ethan found himself swept up in a whirlwind of activities he never imagined he'd be part of. The women, fueled by cocktails and camaraderie, decided it was time for a makeover session. "Come on, Ethan," Sophie urged, tugging him towards the bathroom. "We can't have you looking out of place at ladies' night." Before he knew it, Ethan was perched on the edge of the bathroom sink, surrounded by a flurry of makeup brushes and compacts. Amanda wielded an eyeliner pencil with the precision of a surgeon, while Sophie debated the merits of various shades of lipstick. "Hold still," Amanda instructed, her tongue poking out in concentration as she applied a thin line of eyeliner. "We want to make those baby blues pop!" Ethan tried his best to remain motionless, his heart pounding in his chest. He'd never worn makeup before, and the sensation of the cool liquid on his skin was foreign and slightly ticklish. "Oh my God, you have such great cheekbones!" Sophie gushed, wielding a brush loaded with shimmering powder. "A little highlight and you'll be glowing like a goddess!" As the women worked their magic, Ethan caught glimpses of his transformation in the mirror. With each swipe of a brush or dab of color, he watched as his features softened and brightened. It was like watching a magic trick unfold before his eyes. "And for the finishing touch," Amanda declared, brandishing a tube of bright red lipstick. Ethan pressed his lips together, trying not to flinch as the creamy lipstick glided across his mouth. When he finally turned to face the mirror, he barely recognized himself. His eyes seemed larger, framed by long, dark lashes. His cheekbones shimmered in the harsh bathroom light, and his lips were a perfect, glossy red. "Well?" Sophie asked, bouncing on her toes with excitement. "What do you think?" Ethan stared at his reflection, a mix of emotions swirling inside him. He looked pretty. There was no other word for it. It was strange and unsettling, yet oddly thrilling.
I don't know what to say,"
he stammered, touching his cheek gently. "You look fabulous, darling," Amanda declared, giving him a playful swat on the behind. "Now let's get you dressed for success." Before Ethan could protest, he found himself being ushered out of the bathroom and towards a small storage room at the back of the bar. Sophie produced a key from her purse with a flourish. "The owner's my cousin," she explained with a wink. "She always keeps some spare outfits back here for emergencies." The storage room was cramped but well organized, with racks of clothing lining the walls. Amanda and Sophie dove in, rifling through hangers with the enthusiasm of kids in a candy store. "Ooh, how about this?" Amanda held up a sparkly silver dress that looked like it had seen better days. Sophie wrinkled her nose. "Too disco. We want classy, not trashy." As the women debated, Ethan stood awkwardly in the corner, feeling more out of place than ever. He was about to suggest that maybe this wasn't such a good idea when Sophie let out a triumphant cry. "Found it! This is perfect!" She emerged from the racks holding a sleek black dress with a high neckline and a daring slit up the side. Ethan's eyes widened as he realized what was about to happen. "Oh no, I couldn't possibly. Nonsense!" Amanda interrupted, already working on the buttons of his shirt. "You can't go to ladies' night dressed like that. Trust us, you'll look amazing." Finally dressed and properly proportioned, Ethan was led back to the full-length mirror in the bathroom. The person staring back at him was a stranger, a tall, elegant woman with smoky eyes and red lips, curves accentuated by the clinging black dress.
I can't believe it,"
Ethan whispered, turning slightly to see himself from different angles. "Believe it, honey," Amanda said, throwing an arm around his shoulders. "You're one of us now." As they made their way back to the main area of the bar, Ethan felt a strange mix of excitement and terror. He wobbled slightly in the borrowed heels, trying to mimic the confident strut of the women around him. The night took on a surreal quality as Ethan found himself fully immersed in the world of ladies' night. He sipped fruity cocktails, gossiped about celebrities he'd never heard of, and even attempted to join in on a spirited debate about the merits of various skincare routines.
"So, Ethan," one of the women, he thought her name might be Jessica, leaned in conspiratorially. "Spill the tea. Any hot dates lately?" Ethan nearly choked on his drink. "Oh, not really. Been pretty focused on work and stuff." The women around him let out a collective groan of sympathy.
"Girl, you need to get out there,"
Amanda declared, wagging a perfectly manicured finger at him.
"Life's too short to waste on work. We need to find you a man."
Ethan's eyes widened in panic.
"Oh no, that's really not necessary."
But his protests fell on deaf ears as the group launched into an animated discussion about the best dating apps and pickup lines. Ethan sat there, nodding along and making non-committal sounds, all while praying for the ground to open up and swallow him whole. As the night wore on, Ethan found himself being dragged onto the dance floor. The DJ had switched to a pulsing beat that seemed to vibrate through his entire body. He stood awkwardly at first, unsure of how to move in the dress and heels.
"Come on, loosen up,"
Sophie shouted over the music, demonstrating a series of hip swivels that Ethan could only dream of replicating. Closing his eyes, Ethan took a deep breath and tried to let the music guide him. He swayed his hips experimentally, feeling ridiculous but strangely liberated. The women around him cheered encouragingly, and soon he found himself lost in the rhythm, arms raised above his head as he twirled and shimmied. For a moment, all his worries and insecurities melted away. He wasn't Ethan, the guy who accidentally crashed a ladies' night. He was just another person on the dance floor, free to express himself without judgment. As the song came to an end, Ethan found himself breathless and giddy. The women gathered around him, showering him with compliments and high fives.
"Girl, you've got moves!"
Amanda exclaimed, fanning herself dramatically.
"Who knew Ethel's cousin was such a dancing queen?"
Ethan grinned, riding the high of the moment.
"What can I say? It must run in the family."
The group made their way back to their booth, collapsing onto the plush seats with sighs of contentment. Ethan's feet were killing him, and he had a newfound respect for anyone who could dance in heels for extended periods. As they caught their breath, the conversation turned to more personal topics. Ethan found himself struggling to keep up with the rapid-fire exchange of relationship drama and workplace gossip. "So, Ethan," Sophie said, leaning in with a mischievous glint in her eye.
"What's the craziest thing you've ever done for love?" Ethan froze, his mind racing to come up with a suitably feminine response. "Oh, well, I once drove across 3 states to surprise my boyfriend for his birthday." The women cooed appreciatively, and Ethan felt a small twinge of guilt for the lie. But he was in too deep now to back out. "That's so romantic," Jessica sighed. "I wish my ex had been that thoughtful. All he ever did was forget our anniversary and leave his dirty socks on the floor." This sparked a round of commiseration as the women shared their own tales of relationship woes. Ethan listened with fascination, gaining insights into a world he'd never really considered before. As the night wore on, Ethan found himself genuinely enjoying the company of these women. They were funny, kind, and fiercely supportive of one another. He felt a pang of envy for the bond they shared, wondering if he'd ever experienced anything quite like it in his own friendships. The conversation eventually turned to more serious topics, with the women discussing the challenges they faced in their careers and personal lives. Ethan listened intently, gaining a new appreciation for the unique pressures and expectations placed on women in society. "It's just so frustrating," Amanda said, her voice tinged with anger. "I work twice as hard as the guys in my office, but I'm still passed over for promotions. And then they have the audacity to tell me I'm being too aggressive when I speak up for myself." The others nodded in agreement, sharing their own stories of workplace discrimination and double standards. Ethan felt a mixture of shock and shame as he realized how little he'd understood about these issues before. That's awful," he said softly, genuinely moved by their experiences. "I had no idea it was so bad." Sophie patted his hand sympathetically. "Welcome to the real world, honey. But hey, at least we've got each other, right? Sisterhood is powerful." The women raised their glasses in a toast, and Ethan joined in, feeling a strange sense of belonging. For a moment, he forgot about the deception that had brought him here and simply basked in the warmth of their companionship. As the night began to wind down, Ethan found himself dreading the moment when he'd have to leave. He'd come here on a whim, expecting nothing more than a bit of silly fun. Instead, he'd gained a newfound respect for the women around him and a deeper understanding of their experiences. "Ladies, it's been real," Amanda declared, raising her glass for one final toast. "To new friends and unforgettable nights." They clinked their glasses together, and Ethan felt a lump form in his throat. He knew he should come clean, tell them the truth about who he was and how he'd ended up here. But the thought of shattering this moment of connection was too painful to bear. As they gathered their things and prepared to leave, Ethan found himself being pulled into a group hug. The scent of perfume and hairspray enveloped him, and he felt a surge of affection for these women who had welcomed him so warmly. "We have to do this again soon," Sophie insisted, squeezing his arm. "Promise you'll come back and visit us, Ethan." Ethan nodded, not trusting himself to speak. He knew he could never return, that this night was a one-time fluke that could never be repeated. But in that moment, surrounded by warmth and acceptance, he wished with all his heart that he could. As they stepped out into the cool night air, Ethan hung back, watching as the women hailed taxis and said their goodbyes. He felt a strange mix of emotions: joy at the experiences he'd shared, sadness at the deception he'd maintained, and a lingering sense of confusion about his own identity. Amanda was the last to leave, turning to give him one final hug. "Take care of yourself, sweetie, and remember, you're always welcome with us."
Ethan watched as she climbed into a taxi and disappeared into the night. He stood there for a long moment, the breeze ruffling the hem of his borrowed dress. Finally, with a deep sigh, he turned and began the long walk home. As he made his way through the quiet streets, Ethan's mind raced with thoughts and questions. He'd set out this evening looking for a bit of excitement, maybe a funny story to tell his friends. Instead, he'd gained a new perspective on the world and a deeper understanding of himself. The makeup on his face felt heavy now, the dress constricting. But as he caught his reflection in a storefront window, Ethan realized that he didn't want to wash it all away just yet. This night, this experience, had changed him in ways he was only beginning to understand. He knew that tomorrow would bring its own challenges. He'd have to figure out how to return the dress, how to explain his absence to his friends, how to process everything he'd learned. But for now, in the quiet of the night, Ethan allowed himself to simply be. As he rounded the corner to his street, Ethan felt a sense of both relief and loss. The adventure was over, but the memories and the lessons would stay with him forever. He climbed the stairs to his apartment, fumbling with the keys as he struggled to balance in the unfamiliar heels. Finally inside, Ethan leaned against the closed door and let out a long, shaky breath. He kicked off the painful shoes and padded to the bathroom, flicking on the light to examine his reflection one last time.
Thanks for watching, my girlies! Be sure to check out Patreon for more!